So at this point we've removed the existing rust and reinforced the bedside for further metalwork. So as you can see, we've got the patch panel. It's a pretty decent sized bedside panel, but we're not going to use the whole thing. So we've taken the part that we've cut from the existing bedside and laid it on top of the panel. And I didn't like what I had cut out, so I want to cut out a little bit more. And you kind of see I've taken some white marker and made it a little bit bigger, and so that's about the size we're gonna try and put in there. So we're gonna cut this panel out here, and what I like to do is kind of take this cutoff wheel and move it down the seam where I'm cutting. I don't like to stay in one spot too much because it tends to put a lot of heat into it, and these thin metals they can kind of warp on you. So I tend to move around a little bit, tend to just take a little bit out and then move to another spot, again just to keep the heat down. So using this new Astro cutoff wheel, it's a lot better than the Power Mate that I was using. The Power Mate was not a good tool, so this was about, I don't know, maybe $50. So a good investment. You can feather the speed real well. I like it. It's worked out really well so far. So here you can see I've put the panel up onto the bedside. I've marked it with a indexing tool, scratched a line in it, whatever you want to call it. And I've said this in the past in my other videos that you really do need to keep the gaps between the patch panel and you know, the piece of work you're trying to fix. So you need to keep those gaps really tight. Otherwise, they can be really hard to weld. So you were just taking the cutoff wheel and trying to take this extra material out piece by piece. Kind of going around in a clockwise direction, fitting this panel in, just trying to get it super close and tight so that the welding goes well. And you can hear, or you can see here, that I'm trying to fit it up there. Another thing that's a little bit different about the section of the bedside that I'm in right here is that you're down on that flange. So where the wheel well, they bend that, they stamp that flange in there, and in order to mark it where it's actually going to weld in, you gotta take that flange out first so that it sits up in there correctly. Otherwise, the existing body of work will tend to cheat it by about 1/16 of an inch, whatever. I forget, whatever 18 gauge metal is, I guess. So once you remove that, then you can just keep making sure that you've got it up there and it's fitting the way you want and that it's outlined correctly, so that when you cut, your gaps are nice and tight. So once I get this cut out here, we'll put the panel back up and check the clearances to see how tight the seam is to the new panel. And I don't know, it's just kind of a repetitive process that you get into, making sure that the piece of work is where you want it when you go to weld it. So now I got my 4-inch grinder with a cutoff disc on it. What we're doing here is just taking off the burrs, taking some of the old primer off so that when we go to weld it, we got a nice shiny sheet to weld to. And this is important just to make sure that your welds go in there as nice as possible. So here I am in one of the numerous fit and refit portions of the process. So gap doesn't look right, take your cutoff wheel or grinder and take a little bit off here and there, fit it back up, see how it looks, see if you think your weld's gonna fit in there nicely, and just kind of repeat the process. So just fitting the panel back up a couple more times, trying to get it really quite close. So here I found a little bit of a spot that's just got some interference to it. So just slightly taking the cutoff wheel and actually the edge of the cutoff wheel and just trying to take just a little bit off this edge so it fits a little bit better. And this is part of the process that can be a little frustrating, but it and time consuming, but it pays off in the end. So here I am trying to take the patch and just use my thumbs here to put just a little bit of a bend, so as it tails off down towards the bottom of the wheel well, the panel, the existing body of work has a little bit more curvature in it than the panel does, the aftermarket panel does. So just trying to use my thumbs or whatever to put a little bit of bend or curvature in it. So just working it so it turns out the best it can. So here's the end result to the fitting. I've got some of the welding squares, magnetic welding squares, holding it on there. Camera works a little sloppy, not too good on the camera work there, but there are a couple. There's one spot there that you just saw where the gap is wider than I would have liked it, but otherwise I thought it turned out pretty good and lines up pretty nicely. So first thing I like to do is tack the panel in on the corners, and then what I try to do is I try to put a spot weld every 3 inches and then keep moving down the seam until I go around the entire seam, and then I start back over on the left hand side, and then I'll split the difference between the two previous spot welds where they are. So I talked to a weld engineer at work, and he was saying that when they have flatness specs on thin sheet metal, whether they're manually welding it or the robotic welders are welding it, that they do this. They'll weld a couple forward, they'll take a couple spot welds, and then they'll actually go back. So rather than going down the seam like I would normally do. What he told me to do was actually come back. So you see me spot welding there, and then I move back, and then that helps resist the curl in the longitudinally down the seam. It doesn't do anything for transversely, but he said that that's what they do to try to get it from curling along the direction of the seam. So weld one and then kind of go back. So it's like, take one step forward, 2 steps back, and just keep moving your way down the weld seam. So once the welding is finished up, we'll switch tools here, go to the angle grinder, and I think this is a 36 grit roll lock. So we'll sit here and grind some of our welds down, and we'll take a look at the finished product. So here's the finished product. Got it all tucked in there, welded in, ground down, and next we'll probably be looking at repairing a dent in the back side of this panel. Thanks for watching.